Math. Okay, then let's get into the session. Here we have three speakers, as I said. The first one is Ms. Brenda Santamaria, Chief of the Electoral Observation Section at OAS, the Organization of American States. The topic is planning and executing an international observation mission during the COVID-19 with the experience of the 2020 Dominican Republic elections. Uh, I would like you to understand her presentation is pre-recorded due to the time difference. So Ina, could you please share the slides for Ms. Santa Maria?
Good afternoon from Washington, D.C. My name is Brenda Santamaria. I'm the Chief of the Electoral Observation Section at the Department of Electoral Cooperation and Observation of the Organization of American States. As you might know by now, this is a tape presentation. Because of the time difference, I was not going to be able to be awake with you during the event, but I'm very glad I was invited. Thank you, AWeb, for inviting me to participate and to share with you our experience deploying a mission in the middle of a pandemic in the Dominican Republic. We were there for the extraordinary general, presidential, and legislative elections held in July 5th. As you all know by now, given the global health situation, we knew since March, when we still were there for the municipal elections, that this was going to be an extremely complex mission from the logistical point of view. Fortunately, as an organization, we have been working in the Dominican Republic since 1962. So by the time that this election came up, we've already deployed 17 electoral observations missions in the country. And we were in the Dominican Republic as a mission for the municipal election. The fact that we've been already there this year and many other times before this year in the country was definitely an advantage for us as an organization in order to face this new challenge. We knew the main actors. We had fluent communications with electoral and governmental authorities. We had studied the country legal framework and the recent electoral changes, and we already knew some of the potential challenges that this election might confront. However, the health context and the restrictions in travel posed major challenges during the preparation of this mission. In order to respond to these challenges, the first thing we had to do was to reflect on the way we were going to implement our methodology. We wanted to observe in a comprehensive way the electoral process, and we needed to take into consideration the new scenario. So we decided to implement an innovative approach that would combine the presence of experts and observers in the country and the use of virtual platforms for our experts to be able to interview the different stakeholders. I want to present a parenthesis here. The organization had already deployed a mission to Suriname, the country that had elections on May 25th. Even though the mission was smaller, we implemented the same combination of virtual and the presence of observers in the country for election day. In the case of the Dominican Republic, the chief of mission that worked with us in previous processes in the municipal election was former president of Chile, Eduardo Frei Tagle. And accompanying and leading the group of experts and the core group that was deployed to the Dominican Republic in July was Secretary Guerrero, Francisco Guerrero. He's our Secretary for Strengthening Democracy at the OAS. So the leadership of the mission, the chief of mission, virtually, Secretary Guerrero, our director Gerardo de Casa, and myself held meetings during the week prior to the election. Part of us were in presence, social distancing, wearing masks, and taking all the health preventive measures recommended, and President Frei was live via Zoom all the meetings that we held. It is also worth mentioning that we had the strong collaboration of governmental and electoral authorities in order to perform in this mission. The government ensured that the airspace was open for a flight to come in with the core group team, and also the electoral management bodies, especially the Junta Central Electoral, provided us with protective gear for our team and for the whole mission. Our methodologies coordinators, specialists in political participation of women, political financing, electoral justice, and other members of the mission who were supporting this deployment were working from their home countries. So how did the experts work? Like we are doing now. They used WebEx, Zoom, FaceTime, WhatsApp groups in order to hold the meetings. They were basically using the platforms that local actors preferred. Another big challenge for us was to deploy observers in the Dominican Republic. As I mentioned, the borders were closed, so we couldn't do as we usually do and bring in international observers. What we did is we implemented a system to recruit international observers within the country. So as you might know, and if you don't know, you can access our manuals online, we have different criteria to ensure that our observers are impartial. So whenever we recruit people that are international and are not nationals of the country that is holding the election, and we do so in the country that is holding the election, they have to be, comply with some requirements added to the ones that we have for international observers. So they have to have lived in the country for a certain amount of time. They have to have no political ties. So in order to accomplish this, our team had interviews during 3 weeks with more than 90 people that applied to be observers during these periods through different platforms. And it was quite complicated. It was a big challenge because out of the 90 people that we interviewed, we ended up having 45 observers. This was not only due to the requirements that we have, but it was also due to the tests, the COVID tests that they had to go through, as we all did. It's important to say that the whole team that came from Washington, D.C. to Santo Domingo was tested prior to the trip to ensure that we were not bringing or transmitting the disease into the country. And then with the collaboration of the government, we were able to test every observer, every driver, every local staff that performed with the mission in order to ensure the health of the mission and that we were not transmitters of the disease during deployment. So that was another big challenge for us, but everybody got their tests, and whomever got tested positive, that we had cases, they were sent home and they had to follow the protocols established by the government. So everybody in the mission was provided with protective gear. Everybody was wearing masks all day. It can be very uncomfortable and challenging at times. You have to take breaks sometimes in between meetings, go to a place where you're safe to take your mask off. But everybody was required to wear them because that's a well-known protection against transmission of this disease. We also adjusted our cars and our logistics. The cars had special plastics in between the front and the rear seat in order to create another barrier between drivers and observers. Even though they were all tested and tested negative, we had to be very careful and take all the measures possible. The observers kept the windows down when they were on the cars. We did that when we were moving around the city. Also, our drivers were trained, our observers were trained. And how did we perform the training of our observers? They were 45 local people, or international actually, that were living in the country. I don't want to confuse you with that. They were international observers living in the Dominican Republic. So we split them in 3 groups in order to have them all seated and comfortable along the day that our training takes place, but they were wearing their masks. They were sitting 2 meters apart on the side and on the front and back. And in order to achieve that, we had to divide them in groups. So we held 3 different training sessions during the same day. We ventilated the rooms in between sessions. So we not only had like 45-minute sessions, they broke, they opened, they sanitized the place. Nobody exchanged seats with anybody. They kept their seats. So we tried to take every measure possible to avoid any type of contact. And we did so in our meetings with the chief of mission and the leadership of the mission. I'm sorry about that. We had 2 meters apart, and we were on one side many times, and the people, the different stakeholders were on the other side, having lots of distance in between, and we wore masks all day. The hotel was also accommodating to us, and they provided special rooms for dinner with distance. They provided us offices in different floors, and they hold our rooms in different floors in order to keep distance and avoid contact as much as possible. And obviously, when we were, if we had protocols, if there was a case where someone tested positive and was in contact with someone, that person was isolated till it was tested back again and could be released. So there were protocols before, during, and obviously after the election, asking observers to contact us in case they had experienced any symptoms of, or they need any support from us to get medical attention. As we usually do at the OAS, we provide medical health insurance for our observers, and we did that too. We also had contacts of doctors and clinics in case that was needed. On July 5th, for election day, we changed some of our protocols. What happened? We usually observe around 10 polling places during election day. This time we requested our observers to stick with the sample and to visit around 5 polling places. So what they did is they went to their sample polling place in the morning, at lunchtime, it's usually at noon, and by the closing of the polling place, and then visit another 2 places. This was one, to avoid big amount of contact, but at the same time so they could rest. We understand that having to wear the masks, the shields in the heat can be very tiring, and so we wanted them to be able to perform during the entire day. During all this time, we held more than 30 meetings, virtually, our experts, and in presence with our chief of mission and the leadership of the mission. And on July 10th, the mission presented an 18 pages preliminary report with its main findings and recommendations, as we usually do. The document was based on the information reported by the observers and the information compiled by the experts virtually. In summary, as we anticipated, it was an extremely complex mission from the logistical point of view, one that forced us to redefine our usual procedures. And thanks to the collective efforts of our team and to the different authorities of the Dominican Republic, including governmental and electoral, and their access that they provided, we were able to deploy a mission made up of 73 international experts and observers of 18 nationalities, of whom 57 were deployed in the Dominican territory, 6 observed elections in Miami, Madrid, and New York, while the rest worked remotely from different countries. It was an enormous load of work. But in the end, we were able to honor our commitment by conducting a professional, rigorous, and impartial assessment of the election process. Personally, I am extremely proud of the work we did. I thank you for your attention, and I wish you the best in these challenging times. Have a great afternoon and a great session.
All right. It just looked like she's just joining our webinar because of the camera of the angle. Didn't- Now here we have Mr. Amaya Veer, Program Officer at the AMPRO, Asian Network for Free Elections, International Election Observation and Capacity Building Wing. He's going to talk about the strategies for international and domestic election observation in Asia during COVID-19. Now the floor is yours, Mr. Veer.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to thank AWeb very much for inviting me to participate in this. I will be sharing a PowerPoint presentation, which should now appear on your screens. Just before I start, I would like to say that a lot of my points would actually overlap with what Mrs. Santamaria from the OAS was saying. That was not intentional. It's just that election observation organizations had to go through the same risk assessment protocol, and it seems like we came up with sort of the same solutions. So I'm sure you'll see that a lot of our solutions are similar to some of those that were introduced in the previous presentation. So I would like to start by saying that early in 2020, back in March, ENFRA adopted a risk mitigation strategy that was comprehensive and that was to be implemented throughout all future election observation efforts, no matter in what country. So that was our baseline to be implemented. So some of the considerations that we came up with was that first, before you even start about deploying observers in a host country, you need to select observers that, if possible, come from lower risk countries where there's little or no local transmission of the coronavirus at present. That's part of the risk mitigation, is that first you have to select the appropriate people. Then you also have to select the appropriate flight routes because international travel is the critical component in these times. And Asia, perhaps more than other continents, because it's still very much under lockdown. International travel throughout Asia is very, very difficult at the moment. The third point, which is something that was brought up in the previous presentation, is very important. It's the coordination between election observation organizations and local authorities, usually the Election Commission and also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That's something that's critical for any organization, perhaps even more for us because we're a non-governmental organization. So we do need some kind of assistance from the Election Commission to be able to bring our people in the country. We decided early on that our observers and staff would comply with any of the applicable travel restrictions enforced by the country. For instance, if a country requires mandatory quarantine before we can conduct observation, then we would go through it. The same goes with PCR testing, which is a requirement in most countries today. Once we would be in a host country, our baseline policies would be to really insist that everyone in the team, both observers and support staff, would need to maintain social distancing and would need to wash their hands frequently with either soap or hand sanitizer. Of course, all observers and staff would also be required to wear face masks in public, as well as other protective equipment. We also are implementing a policy of maintaining a detailed journal of activities, including the locations and the contact information of people we meet for contact tracing purposes. So that means that if there's any positive testing of someone in our team, that we would be able to hand over to the authorities the list of people that we met in the days prior to the testing. Of course, that does not compromise our independence as election observers because we will not share the content of the interviews, but just so that the health authorities can identify the people that could have been in contact with people testing positive and then isolate them appropriately. And of course, we also monitor closely the health of our observers and staff with healthcare professionals in the country. And something that is not written, but that was brought up in the previous presentation, is that we also provide health insurance for everyone on the team. And in these days, we need to make sure that this health insurance explicitly covers COVID-19 as well. So how does that look in practice? Right now, we are engaged in a small election assessment in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is holding its parliamentary elections in 1 week from today, August 5. That came after 2 successive postponements of the elections that were initially scheduled for April 25. So we had to go through several rounds of risk assessment, and we had to downsize our mission 2 times before we are at the efforts happening today. Initially, we were intending on sending a full-fledged team of upwards of 40 observers to Sri Lanka, but very early on, it appeared that that would not be possible because of the spread of the virus within Asia. Some countries are too high risk, flights were being interrupted, so we knew that that was unrealistic. What we then prepared for was a reduced mission with fewer observers, but those observers will come, as I said, from low-risk countries, would go through quarantine because those were the regulations that the authorities in Sri Lanka were asking us to go through. And despite all of that enhanced collaboration and despite all of the risk mitigation measures that we took, what it came down to was that there simply were no flights to go to Sri Lanka because Sri Lanka experienced a couple of weeks ago a new outbreak of the disease and shut down its airspace. And that's simply, there's nothing we can do against that. So we can manage the risk as best as we can, but we are also subject to factors outside of our control. So what we then came up with is something similar to what the OAS did, but on a much smaller scale, is that we conduct an election assessment remotely with some of our experts interviewing from, for instance, Bangkok or Kuala Lumpur or other cities in Asia through modern means of communication, such as Zoom, WhatsApp, and such. So that's one part of it. The other part is that we recruited international volunteers that live in Sri Lanka. So that sounds a lot like what happened in the Dominican Republic. We have a limited number of those volunteers that will help us collect data in polling stations and counting centers especially. Most of the interviews will be conducted remotely, but we do need to monitor polling stations, and that really is something that you cannot do despite technology. One document that was crucial early on for NFRL and other observers in Sri Lanka to think about how you go through the motions to actually make election observation happen was a document that 7 organizations, including ourselves, initiated and endorsed together. This is something that we call the COVID-19 Code of Conduct for Election Observers. We did that back in April, at the time where we knew the elections were going to be postponed. The Election Commission was incredibly busy protecting its own staff and the voters, and election observers just thought that there was something we could do to make everyone safe and to ensure that the country benefits from the presence of international observers. So domestic and international election observation organizations came together, drafted a document that's available on our website if you want to see the full text. And in that document, it lists down requirements such as wearing protection for everyone in the teams. Social distancing is there, contact tracing is there, sanitizing vehicles is there. And the important part also is that it comes with a pledge that organizations can make all of their volunteers and staff sign, so that it's not only the organizations taking the commitment, it's also the individuals. so that if you responsibilize everyone on board, your risk is much lower. Sri Lanka has a long history, a long tradition of election observation, and it was really something that we needed to make sure it was still going to happen despite the pandemic. And I think all of those organizations have done a tremendous job in not only drafting the document, but implementing them. I talked a little bit about international election observation organizations like ourselves. But in the end, we are very small scale compared to some of the domestic observer groups that exist in the country. For instance, one of those groups is our member PAFREL. PAFREL is the oldest and largest election observation group in Sri Lanka. This year, they also developed a mobile application for collecting data that comes on top of the other methods of collecting data, but that also fits into the perspective of limiting human interaction as much as possible and relying on electronic communication whenever possible. They had to revise their own deployment plans, and the current deployment plan is still massive. It's a major downsize compared to the previous election, because I believe they had something around 20,000 observers back in November during the presidential election. But now they have 322 long-term observers. They had 1,000 observers just for advanced voting, which they call postal voting in that country. And they will have 3,000 mobile observers in 260 vehicles just for election day. So it's still a massive effort, as you can see, all over the country. Their risk mitigation plans includes enforcing the code of conduct, which I was just mentioning previously, but also they prepare a booklet of guidelines for their observers in the local languages to make sure that everyone can really understand what they're supposed to do. They provide face masks, hand sanitizer, thermometers to the observer. They also do social distancing, and they arrange health insurance for their staff. So you see that a lot of them recoup what was said by myself and in previous presentation. This is one example of the observers taking the pledge. So you'll see there's a significant amount of face masks, even though not everyone has it, but they're also social distancing, and they're reading the pledge out loud to make sure that everyone will commit to it. A second example would be our second member in Sri Lanka, which is CMEV, or the Center for Monitoring Election Violence. And they have a similar deployment plan with, again, 100 long-term observers. They have over 1,000 field coordinators. They have 3,000 observers in polling stations. The difference is that their observers will be static and just stay in one polling station on election day instead of being mobile. But they do have 100 mobile observers that are all observers with disabilities going around polling stations to promote inclusiveness and accessibility of PWD voters in polling stations. The risk mitigation plans are very similar to what you heard from PAFREL. One indication I can tell you is that CMEV shared with me that the overall budget for observation, for this observation mission is a 49% increase compared to the previous budget, which of course is a significant amount. And that means a lot of planning. There's a lot of extra steps. For instance, they have to allot budget for quarantine of their staff that could be tested positive. And in the end, it's a more expensive effort for fewer observers, but they're still able to make it happen. And right now they have thousands of people out in the field. Their observer training also look like this. So with high level of compliance when it comes to face masks, social distancing, a lot of online training also took place more than usual. And if you were to look at their office, you see that they rearranged the desks so that everyone has more distance between themselves. And also everyone is wearing face masks throughout the day, even within the office. And again, regular testing, consulting medical professionals, all of that is part of a comprehensive plan. I would also like to share that Sri Lanka is not the first country to hold elections in Asia. There have been other countries that have held national elections. For instance, Singapore, there was South Korea, but Sri Lanka is really the first one where you see significant domestic election observation, by which I mean thousands of people actually being deployed in polling stations. Mongolia also had a general election last month where there was small-scale election observation by some youth networks. Thailand had by-elections last month, and again we'll have next week, in which you have election observers going through the steps. And the picture here is from Hong Kong. Hong Kong held a primary, which was organized by political parties. 2 weeks ago, they had a primary, and you can see that there were observers in face masks within the polling stations. Excuse the anonymity of the picture, but that is mandated by the recent security laws in Hong Kong. So to protect anonymity of observers is very important. In terms of my PowerPoint, this is over, but as you can see, comprehensive risk mitigation, a lot of it overlapped with what the OAS shared. And if there's only one thing I would like you to remember from this, is that coordination between election observers and election management bodies and other authorities is absolutely indispensable. It's needed more than ever if we are to make election observation happen. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Beer. And now we have our last one, Mr. Pablo Lim, a program officer in the AWeb training department. The topic is election observation during the COVID-19, focus on the future plans and considerations. Mr. Lim, now can you start over?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. N, and good afternoon for all participants of AWeb webinar. I am Pablo Lim, the program officer of the training department at AWeb Secretariat. It's a great honor to be here and to be at the AWeb webinar with our friend Amphra and OAS. And also I have the opportunity to share about our experience and knowledge to grow the democracy together for all worldwide. And I would like to thanks our two special guests, a wonderful participant, Ms. Brenda Santamaria, the Chief of Electoral Observation Sector of OAS, and Emmanuel Villa, Program Officer from DIFRAM. I think all international institutes have the same consideration about the pandemic situation of COVID-19. So I want to introduce and share with you all the participants about the AWeb EVP Electoral Visiting Program and the future plans and consideration at the pandemic situation on COVID-19. Now I want to share my presentation. Excuse me, I am looking for to share. The presentation. The contents is follow this order. First, I will introduce briefly the vision and the mission of the AWeb Electoral Visiting Program. Next, I will present the 2020 AWeb EVP, which held at the first semester of this year. And for the last, I want to share about the future plans and the consideration in the pandemic situation of all over the world. Okay, then let me begin with the introduction of AWeb Electoral Visiting Program. The EVP Electoral Visiting Program defined at the AWeb Charter Article 2, Vision and Mission, Article 4, Objectives. This is Article 2 of the AWeb Charter, described like this, to foster efficiency and effectiveness in coordinating free, fair, transparent, and participative election worldwide, and the mission to identify lasting trend challenges and the development in the democratic electoral management and electoral process, and to facilitate appropriate exchange of experience and expertise among members with the objective to strengthening electoral democracy worldwide. And I can say that the Article 2 is the main point of our EVP. Also, as Article 2 of the AU said, the main point of the key of EVP is exchange appropriate experience and expertise among the members. This is the main objective of our EVP, is to share to knowledge and know-how in election area between participating EMBs and also with the host EMB. Another important thing is to interchange information based on the transparency, the fairness, and the credibility on the election management. And also we can have importance to propose the supportive relationship between election management bodies and the election stakeholders, and to facilitate access to and sharing the experience, research and technological information between and among election management bodies and election stakeholders. For the last one, our main purpose is to achieve the principal goal of AWEB, democracy to grow for all worldwide. Based on these definitions, AWEB started the EVP program from 1915 at the general election of Kyrgyz Republic. After first EVP program, AWEB increased each year. AWEB proceed the last one, at least one EVP program each year. 2016, we organized the general election of the Dominican Republic and the legislative election of Bosnia and Herzegovina. In 1917, general election of the Ecuador. In 1918, general election of the El Salvador. In 2020, at the local election of the Dominican Republic. Unfortunately, in 2019, we couldn't have EVP program for internal reasons. Now let me explain about EVP program at the 2020. First semester of this year include January and February. After the COVID pandemic, the AWEB Secretariat have received an EVP invitation of the Central Election Commission of Taiwan in January, the National Electoral Tribunal of Peru, and the Central Electoral Board of the Dominican Republic in February. These are pictures, some EVP which will be participate on this January and February. The picture on the left side is EVP of Extraordinary Congressional Election of Peru, which held in 28th of January. We can see how the voter can vote peacefully and freely, and the EVP participant was free to visit the polling station and ask for some information they need. And other side, there is a picture from the Dominican Republic on the local election, which is held in 16th of February. Here we can see also observers wearing the blue waistcoat and asking some question about the election to the members of the polling station. Also, can you see the manual counting at the polling station? These two EVP was very effective to share their experience because of the way of voting. They use the traditional way voting and manual vote, and the new way voting using the technology machine to vote. I will not explain about this detailed information because we are talking about the consideration and the future plan of the EVP program. So I will pass from here. Now this is the pictures are some picture of the general election, presidential and congressional election in the Dominican Republic. It's held on 5th of July of this month. Unfortunately, AWEB could not be at the EVP program this election because of the policy of the Dominican government. This election is very significant. This election could say that it's the first election in the Dominican Republic with the pandemic situation. The campaign comparing with the previous election of this year, which show that the last slide, as you can see, is totally different. Everybody, all the members of the polling station, voters, political observation, or JEC workers and other stakeholders of the election had to wear personal prevention kits like masks, hand sanitizers, special clothes and gloves, plastic gloves, all to own safely. Also, they had to install the polling station facilities with the ventilation and disinfection. Even though the pandemic situation of the COVID-19, the election held successfully, but the number of the infectee of COVID-19 increased from the day of the election. I'm not sure the detailed information of the election, the date of the election infected to increase the infectees. But we can now that the pandemic situation is going worse as today. This is a slide about our invitation. We have the Secretariat have invitation of the EVP programs. We had five more invitations received from the National Election Commission of Korea and the Tribunal Superior Electoral for Bolivia and the JECE of the Dominican Republic for the general election, which held the 5th of July, and the Central Election Commission of Kyrgyzstan and Central Election Commission of Moldova. These three elections, first three elections was canceled about the pandemic of the COVID-19. And the following election with the Kyrgyzstan and Moldova, we are having contact with the CEC of our both institute to be part of the EMB at the election. Now I would like to present our future plan and the consideration of the AWA electoral visiting program. The future plan of the AWA EVP is to make operating our program with more safety of the participants. First, we are reviewing the operation plan and guarantee the security of the participants, such as a strengthened cooperation with the host election management bodies and modification of scale of the participant, EVP agenda, safety policy, and so on. There will be many ways to guarantee to safety to EVP participant, but we are considering which the best way to be decided on. Second, the Secretariat is preparing the action manual or in the case of urgency or emergency, such as flights or missing or not arriving or the departure and so on, and local accident, international disease like COVID-19, cholera, yellow fever, malaria, Zika virus, SARS, and so on. Of course, considering each continent situation. Our organization is component with 106 countries and 115 electoral management body in all over the world have to cross the country often. So in these days, the COVID-19 is most hot issue in the world. So we have to consider about the situation all over the world. As I presented before, the objective of the AWA electoral visiting program is to share the experience and know-how to the electoral administration and to interchange the information basis on the transparency in the fairness and the credibility of the election management. But there is a more thing that we have to consider in the stage of the prevention of EVP. I want to mention 5 kinds of consideration to prepare the event. First, each step of the preparation of EVP should be reconsidered. After the detection of COVID-19, the attention of the safety regarding the disease are very low. Almost all diseases have their own vaccine or medicine to cure it, but until we know that we have discovered new disease, COVID-19. All kind of methods, normal life, work, or economy and sociality and so on is changing these days. Many social media and the specialists of each social sector emphasize that have to prepare the post-COVID-19 because we change a lot of things in our normal life. So EVP also have changed with the theme of the word, like a scale of EVP organized and operated operation program to the consideration to the condition of the AF the sorry the condition of the participant, such as submit the certificate or the official documents to prove the symptoms of COVID-19, confirm confirm the prevention method of COVID-19 and other methods and so on. Second, during the operation, EVP have to prevent after and before the meeting and check the personal symptom of COVID-19, such as personal temperature, respiratory disease, maintain the distance, and etc. Follow the instruction to prevent the COVID-19 and introduction of the prevention of COVID-19. The information of introduction is, as you already know, the cleaning hand often, cover the coats and sneeze, avoid the touching nose, eyes, and mouth, and with unwashed hand, avoid close with contact with a person who are sick, wear the mask, and avoid crowd as much as possible, avoid the public areas, follow the introduction provided by the healthcare provider sector. Third, I want to mention is the situation of each participant after leaving the EVP, after returning to their country. If you could say also important that the safety return to own countries after the program, and each country had their own policy to prevent. So it should be followed and the obligation and to check the personal symptom after and before they leaving the host country and arriving at their houses, and so on to also at the stopover. Fourth and fifth main method begins to the EVP operation team and the host team. As I emphasize the safety of the participant, the EVP organization and the operation team shall care more carefully with the programs. Our workers have to protect themselves and the participant also. So they have to prepare the personal prevention or disinfection kit, verify the method of the prevention at the hotels, at the event halls, manualize the operation situation at the urgency secure the concert from the EVP participant and the intervention service. As you know that the AWF EVP participant come from all over the world. The interpretation service also will be very important element because all the members, the EVP member, is not influent at English or not frequent have a facility to speak the hosted EVP language. So I think this is important too. Fifth and the last one to consider is to guarantee the prevention of the EVP participant from the invited EVP. There will be many things that the host EMB have to care, supporting or assistance at the airport and immigration, and participate the method of prevention make a route for EVP. But now the most important thing already we know that is the designation of the emergency facility nearby the accommodation location, and have manualized the process of the appearance of the COVID-19 infected during the program. It will be more effective and effectively in case of emergency or emergency. We will ask this consideration for the EVP in the Kyrgyzstan and the Moldova, which will be held in October or and the November of this year. To conclude my presentation, I want to emphasize again the importance of the prevention of the COVID-19. We all know perfectly the importance of the prevention of this disease. In my opinion, the most important thing is the prevention and separation. Prevention, I will not comment more because I already commented during my presentation. And the separation is also important, that is separate with the normal person to infectee and the observers and the members of the polling station. And also I want to say clearly that with the personal prevention kit, like a mask, the plastic gloves, and the shields, face shield, etc. And we should follow very forcefully to follow to the introduction of the prevention can reduce the contagious of the COVID-19. So following this, the introduction of the prevention of COVID and having a procedures of the organization and the operation EVP, I think will be successful EVP as in the pandemic situation. This is all for my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lim. Yes. Okay, then, great. All presentations are made. There's 3 speakers, one from OAS, Ms. Brenda Santa Maria, and Mr. Amavir from AFRO, and then Mr. Lim from the AWeb Secretariat. So now we'd like to move on to our next session, but now we have a special guest from Moldova. I'd like to introduce Mr. Alexandru Berlinshi of the Central Electoral Commission of the Republic of Moldova. He's going to talk about the upcoming presidential election scheduled to be November 1st and international or domestic observation this year. So now do you have Mr. Alexander Berlinshi? Alexandru Berlinshi,
sorry, our mic was off. Hi everyone, my name is Alexandru Berlinski. I'm from CSA Moldova. I would like to thank you very much to Web to organize this session. It is very interesting to know and knowledge experience of our colleagues from other CSC and depends of organization of this election. As we said, like on the 1st November, we have a presidential election. Central Electoral Commission at this moment is very strong communication with the Minister of Health and National Health Commission that we want to approve of instruction that will approve measure that we have to take against COVID-19. All this action will start in our country at the 1st September. So we have like a month and something to organize and to have everything prepared. So at this moment, all the measures to organize these elections we have taken. Anything extra to say before, so say this again, we don't have to.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Alexander Berlinshi. Okay, then now I'd like to open the floor for a couple of participants for any comments and questions regarding the presentations or the comments made from the AS, AMFREL, AWeb Secretariat, or the Moldovan CC. If you have any, please feel free to wave your hands either in the screen, or you can click the wave function in this program, or you can upload anything to the chat room. We'll be waiting for a few minutes, a couple of minutes, for you to raise any questions and comments. Okay, so I think Mr. Berlinski from the Moldovan CEC would like to speak some more. Mr. Berlinski, you can keep on. Hello, Mr. Berlinski. You told me that you'd like to keep going on a little bit more. I guess there's some communication error between him and me. I'll just then I'll just open the floor for your any participant for any comments and questions. Now, Mr. Berlinski would like to speak. Are you with us, Mr. Berlinski? Maybe I guess not. Okay, so it seems like we're all done here. So as I mentioned before, we'll be sending you the minutes. There's not much, and then if you would like to ask for the any presentations or the video clips from the OAS, maybe you can inquire to our secretariat via the official email address that is provided in on the poster, the AWeb 2013 10@gmail.com. And then we'll just talk to the speakers if they would allow us to share his or her presentations or video clips. And then so for the last, thank you very much for attending today's webinar. And I hope you, your family, and your friends stay safe from the COVID-19. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.